What's up? Welcome to the Sports Bag Bros podcast. It is March Madness Eve. So today we will be counting down the top 10 college players of all time. As you can see, Scott is with me and Trav is not here. He's traveling. Trav, what's happening, Scott?
Not a whole lot, man. Just ready for the madness. Ready to chop it up.
Yeah, what's crazy is we already had a crazy game yesterday. I don't consider it the tournament because it's actually a play-in game, so they're not actually in the tournament. But they did have a wild finish last night. Did you catch it?
No, was that the Carolina game?
No, Carolina won easily. They won by like 20 some. Or that game was over at halftime. The
Yeah.
Alabama State game. They
Ah,
were tied. I believe it was 68-68 all. And there was maybe 2 seconds, 3 seconds left on the clock. And they threw it the length of the court. There's a scrum in the lane. A dude ends up with the ball. And he lays it in with like zero point 0.7 seconds left. It
oh,
was
wow.
sort of reminiscent of USA versus Russia back in '72 when USA got hosed. But
That's
I
a good
mean,
memory.
but talk about a good kickoff to March Madness. You know, you can't beat that. I mean, if you see the replay, you see how crazy it is, or
Yeah, it
how crazy it
sounds
was.
like a Aaron Rodgers Hail Mary.
Anyway, so um, we're gonna do our top 10 college players of all time. I don't know his list. He doesn't know mine. We're just gonna shoot from the hip. But before we start, my name is Bias. I was given that name because of Maryland legend. Unfortunately, he passed away, Danny Bias. But I got his jersey on. Um,
Pick of the Celtics?
excuse me.
Pick of the Celtics?
Yeah, number two draft pick in 1986. He didn't quite make my list, but um, we'll see how it shakes out. You want to start first?
Yeah, I think we may have one that's the same, but it'll be interesting to see how many others there are. The one I was going to go with was Pistol Pete Maravich. I wanted to start with him, and he was kind of a name, and I remember seeing him a little bit when he was in the NCAA, and he
Well,
had
hang
the
on, hang on, hang on. I want to stop you
uh,
because normally we do our list, we rank them.
oh, okay,
So I don't know if you're prepared to do that,
number
but
one,
we'll go
Pistol
from no,
Pete
from we
Maravich.
start from 10 to 1.
Oh
We got to
shit,
start at 10. Now work our
sorry,
way down.
did I go 10?
Yeah.
Okay. Number 10, University of Florida, Fires, Patrick Young from Jacksonville. Great fella. And he took the team to the Final Four, Scholar Athlete of the Year. They beat Kentucky in the SEC championship, and then they ended up going to the Final Four where they lost to UConn. And now UConn actually um, won it all when they beat Kentucky in the final match. So Patrick Young was a big part of that, and he's just such a neat guy. And he's a part of the SEC network and their basketball coverage now. And I've just always been a big fan of him, and so he's my number 10.
10 greatest of all time?
Yeah,
Okay. It's your list. You do
right.
with it what you want.
Yeah,
My number 10 is David Thompson, the Skywalker. NC State, they beat UCLA in the Final Four. I don't remember who they beat in the finals. I think it was Marquette. But that man averaged 27 points per game, 8 rebounds per game. He was a three-time All-American, and he was the NCAA Most Outstanding Player in that 1974 tournament.
my number 9 is a more recent one. It's Zion Williamson, and I really like. His name was everywhere. You just heard a lot about it even before you saw him. And he got injured during the year in February when his shoe fell apart. And a lot of people counseling him, you're going to be the number one draft pick, sit it out. You don't need to go back into it. But he got healthy during the ACC tournament, and he came back and he helped them to win the tournament in 2019. and played in the big dance. They didn't make it all the way, but he is one of the few freshmen ever to score 500 points, have 50 steals and 50 blocks. The only other two are some great college players, Anthony Davis and Kevin Durant. So Zion Williamson's my number 9.
It's pretty good company right there.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even think of Zion Williamson, but he played 1 or 2 years.
Only one.
Just one, yeah. It'd be tough for me to put him in my top 10 for just one season.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
anyway, let's go number 9 for me. I went with Elgin Baylor. He averaged 31 points per game, almost 20 rebounds per game, 19.8. That's ridiculous.
That's
Like he
crazy.
averaged a 19,
That's Will
19.
Chamberlain numbers.
Yeah. He was also the NCAA most outstanding player. I don't remember the year, but he was described as starting the evolution of the athletic chain, which led to Connie Hawkins, Dr. J, and Michael Jordan. So, yeah, Elgin Baylor, he's also one of the all-time greats in the NBA. But in
Yeah.
college, he threw up ridiculous numbers.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think I may be a little bit older than you, and I was like, I'm going to do some of these old guys, and Bias isn't going to know. You're going a lot deeper than I did. That's really good. My 8 is the one that I figured we'd have in common, and that's David Thompson from North Carolina State, the Skywalker. And I didn't see him play, but I read a book about him and some other guys in the NBA, and he played for the Denver Nuggets. And just reading about the way that he played, it was kind of like he was kind of like Dr. J before Dr. J, but he was a smaller guy. Dr. J was probably
Right.
about Irving. He's probably about 6'8" or
Close to
so.
6'7".
Yeah, right. Yeah, he was like what you call a small forward today, whereas
Right.
Thompson was just 6'4", and he could
Right.
just fly all over the place. So, yeah, I have him as my number 8.
Yeah, so a lot of the younger generation currently they talk about how athletes have evolved. They're quicker, stronger, faster, more athletic, et cetera, et cetera. You can't tell me there's a better athlete out there than David Thompson.
Yeah,
And I believe he was the first one called Skywalker. He could get off the ground. But anyway, my number 8 is Elvin Hayes. Big Elvin, he also averaged 31 points per game, averaged 17 rebounds per game. He's a 2-time All-American. He was Player of the Year, and he went to 2 Final Fours.
sounds good. My number 7 is Danny Manning from Kansas. He averaged 25 points a game. His senior year, they won the national championship in 1988. So
Danny and the Miracles.
Right. That's my 7.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Danny Manning. He was a guy that stuck around for 4 years, and eventually it worked out for him. I think Larry Brown was their coach back then, right?
Good be. He's been everywhere.
Yeah, I think Larry Brown was the coach of that team. And when people say Danny and the Miracles, like nobody expected him to win the championship, and Danny was outstanding in that tournament. Okay. So my number 6. Oh yeah, we're at 6, right?
Yep.
Larry Bird. I got Bird. He took a bunch of nobodies to the finals. He averaged 30 points and more than 13 rebounds for his career. He was also National Player of the Year and a 2-time All-American. But, I mean, what else can be said about Bird?
The Hick from French Lick, I think it was.
Right.
And Indiana State, who you haven't heard about before or since.
Right. Before nor after.
And I remember at the same time, I don't think Michigan State was that well known at the time. That was before Tom Izzo, though.
Yeah, I was still really young. I barely remember that game. I remember the pregame more than I do the actual game. I remember them talking about Magic, and I was like, "Who's the Magic Man?" I watched the game. I still didn't know who the Magic Man was. That's how little I was watching the game.
I think that Bird's team was favored, so I was for the underdog. I was for Magic, which was interesting because as a Celtics fan, I've always been a Laker hater, and obviously once they went to the pros, I was all in
Right.
for Bird. So it was kind of an interesting turnabout.
so so how did you become a Celtics fan?
My dad. My dad was a big
Okay.
Celtics fan, and I think he was a big Celtics fan back when Bill Russell and Havlicek and Bob Cousy and all those guys were there. And I just see tapes. And I remember Dad used to watch a show, the Red Auerbach show, and I think it was on a Sunday. And
It
obviously,
was
as a kid, I loved
all
cartoons.
Celtics all the time.
I guess, yeah. And so that show was on Sunday, which normally, was my dad's boring political shows. But the Celtics show started out with, a cartoon leprechaun coming out and dancing around. I'm like, oh, this show looks good. And so I'd stick around and, watch Red Auerbach talk about basketball.
So interesting you mentioned TV show. I just saw a commercial. Netflix is coming out with the Celtics show. I don't know if it's a mini series or if it's going to be episodic. I don't know. I just know the Celtics have a show coming out.
Unfortunately, I think it's on HBO Max or whatever the heck it
Oh,
is.
there you go. HBO Max, not Netflix. You're right.
And
Thank
I
you
was
for
gonna say I've got Netflix, but I don't have HBO.
Yeah, it's HBO Max.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it me or
So
you?
I mean, we're almost halfway. I
Okay.
think well, maybe not. We'll see. Go ahead.
So I don't think I've said Ralph Sampson. Ralph Sampson, 7'4", 16 points a game, 11 rebounds a game, made it to the Final Four. He was the Naismith, the college player of the year, 3 years in a row. So I was really, and as a kid, I was just really impressed with size. I mean, 7'4". I mean,
Yeah,
that's where you start. And I didn't realize this till later, but that's where you start to get to that point of diminishing returns when you get too tall. So he
right.
was able not, and that's one of the things I emphasized on mine. I tried to emphasize guys that were great college players and not so great in the pros. So I was kind of leaning towards guys like Sampson in that way.
I got you. And Samson was definitely like a unicorn. Whoever saw a guy 7'4" and that athletic, plus he may not have been any more thicker than Wemby.
Yeah, yeah, he
Um,
was pretty thin.
yeah, a little bit taller, but well, how tall is Wemby? Like seven
I'd
one?
say about the same, 7'4".
Really? Seven
Yeah,
four? Okay,
yeah,
maybe that's why I got him. I'm thinking of them the same.
yeah.
Obviously, Samson didn't have Wemby's shooting range and his handles, but it was a different time back then. Back
Definitely,
then, big
definitely.
men were told get in the paint. And
Yeah,
Samson, man, talk about a force,
yeah.
offense and defense. Yeah, all-time standout for Virginia. So my number 5 is Bill Russell. He averaged a 2020 in college, 20.7 points and 20.3 rebounds. He was also a two-time Player of the Year, two-time All-American, and led his team to 2 championships. That's hard to beat.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll never have to argue with me about how great Bill Russell
Yeah, he
was.
started his winning ways. People may think he only won with the Celtics because he had all those Hall of Famers with him, but his go look at his college days.
That's what I was thinking up until yesterday when I started doing my research. And I was like, "God, he was great." But then I was like, my bias was towards these guys who, they were great college, but not as great pros. Now, my next guy is going to go against that grain because, I mean, as good as a college player he was, I think he was a better pro. But my next one, number 5, is Bill Bradley, which he was called Dollar Bill long
Mhm.
before Limp Bizkit did $3 bills, y'all. But yeah, and that's another guy where I read a book about him, and anyway, he won 1964 gold medal in the Olympics, made it to the Final Four, and so he played for Princeton. Really bright guy, Rhodes Scholar, Some consider him the greatest Ivy League basketball player of all time. Then went on to play with the Knicks with Phil Jackson. Later became a senator.
Right.
It's interesting because Bradley was originally from Missouri, and I read a book he wrote back in '96, and he was from Missouri. Then he goes to school in New Jersey, and then he plays for the Knicks. And he's a senator from New Jersey for a long time. And the first time I really thought about him, I think it was in 1980 when I first got conscious about basketball. And my dad bought me this book about the NBA, and it had like this jump ahead 20 years section type thing. And it was like Bill Bradley running for president. I was like, who's this guy? And Dad told me. And then that's when I got the other book about him. But it was right. He ran for president in the year 2000 against Al Gore. So it's really interesting to kind of watch him climb in politics. I never saw him playing in basketball, but I read about it, and he just seemed like a real talent.
Right. And I'm with you there. I never saw him play, but I read a whole lot about him. And, he's a Hall of Famer, and I can't really argue that. A couple of your other picks up for debate, but Bill Bradley, maybe out not that high, but, he was an all-time great.
Let me say this about Pat Young. I had to put a Gator in there. And if you look at the great Gator teams, they're really teams. They're not, no individual sticks out. I mean, they're a great 4 or 5, but in Patrick Young's era, I thought he really stood out. And it was kind of he's had a really bad physical setback, so it was kind of an emotional pick as well.
I got you.
But he's still doing well. He just he got in a bad car accident. He's fine. He's working on for the SEC channel.
Well, good for him. So my number 4 is the Big O. Indianapolis guy from Crispus Attucks. He won state championship in Indiana, then went to college, averaged 33.8 points per game, 15.2 rebounds per game, 54% shooting, and he was a point guard, averaging almost 15 and a half rebounds per game. He was a 3-time All-American. I mean, you could just go on and on talking about the Big O.
Did you say his name?
Oh, I said Big O, Oscar Robertson.
There you go.
I didn't. My bad. Yeah. I didn't think I had to say
it. You probably didn't, but I was just thinking. I'm like, I know who he is, right? Yeah, I ran into somebody recently a few years ago watching basketball, and I was like, who do you think's the greatest NBA? Because you hear that so much these days. And the guy said Oscar Robertson. I was like, thank you for not succumbing to the recency bias of Jordan, LeBron, Kobe, whatever.
Yeah, I've never seen Oscar. I've seen highlights of him, but for him at that size to average a triple-double,
right?
That's amazing.
Some guys, you just look at their numbers and you're just like, how could that guy not be amazing? And I think in his prime, Russell Westbrook was putting up similar numbers, the triple-double numbers.
Yeah, he averaged a triple-double twice, actually.
Okay, but not near.
But he, I mean, honestly, how many dominant big men are there that you have to contend with for rebounds in the paint?
Right.
Not too many nowadays.
That's true.
So, I mean, and sometimes I would see like players move out the way to let Russ get it. He got some help from his teammates.
Plus, he was angry. You didn't want to get in the angry man's way. He always played angry.
Yeah.
My number 4 is Artis Gilmore, and he led this tiny little school called Jacksonville University all the way to the championship game against UCLA, against a player who was then known as Lou Alcindor, later became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And, he's a little different in that he probably had a better pro career than he had a college career. But I just really like him as a person too. He's stuck around Jacksonville, since his kids went to school here, and he actually does. And let me tell you something: Jacksonville University was never a big school, but it was a decent basketball school in the '80s when I was growing up. And they're just nowhere right now. They are not good at all. But I love the fact that Artis Gilmore calls their games. He does color or play-by-play.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
and I just think that's really cool.
Well, it's good to see artists get a little bit of love here. He was the center for my Bulls when I started liking basketball. Um, wasn't as dominant as I would have liked him to be, but he still would block a shot here, dunk on somebody there. Um, if my dad was still alive, my dad told the story much better than I ever could. But I was watching a Bulls game, and you know how they show you the upcoming schedule. So this particular game, they show the schedule, and Philadelphia's coming to town. So I run to my dad. I tell him, Philly's coming to town. Philly's coming to town. He's like, what are you talking about? Philly's coming to town. I say, Dr. J. He's like, when? I said, I think it was a Tuesday or Wednesday. He's like, that's a school night. And he left it like that. That was the end of it. I was like, oh man, and I guess get to see Dr. J. So I come home from school on that day of the game, and he says, hurry up, do your homework. I said, I just got home. He's like, I said, hurry up and do your homework if we're going to get to the game on time. I said,
Oh
what
my
game? He's like,
In the
you
candy
said
store.
Philly's coming to town. I was like, what, man? I never did my homework so fast.
That's
So
awesome.
we go to the game, and Doc goes down the lane, and Gilmore blocks his shot. Bulls go down. I can't remember if they scored or they got a rebound. Doc wants the ball. He's calling it like, give me the ball. So he comes down the right lane. It was similar to when Dr. J dunked on Bill Walton in the 77 finals, where you see Walton and Walton's looking at, oh, I got him. I got him sized up. I got him sized up. And Doc just goes to, went a little bit higher, threw it down on Gilmore, and the crowd erupted. There may have only been like 6,000 of us there. It was not a full house. The Bulls weren't very good, and I'd
I was
probably
wondering, the Bulls were cheering for him getting a shot.
probably 5,500 of the 6,000 were there to see Dr. J.
Yeah.
So I mean, you just heard a loud whoa, but to hear my dad tell the story, he would drag it out for like 15 minutes and have you rolling the whole time.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was one of one of my best early memories ever.
That's awesome. When I grew up, I was Dad used to always take me to JU games, so I saw a lot of after Gilmore's time, but it was during James Ray's time, and they were pretty good, and they had Tate Slock was their coach, and so we would go. We went to a lot of JU games growing up. Back when they were good enough to play in the Coliseum, now they just usually play on campus. And I ended up going to basketball camp for 2 summers out there when Tate Slock was teaching it, and it was just that's what basketball was like, one of a number of sports, but I think that those camps that I went to, that's what really made me fall in love with the sport. And Tate used to always preach, he was like, don't let the game use you. You use the game. And he had a guy from Jacksonville, Maurice Rulak, as an example. And he said, this man is going to be a doctor one day. And sure enough, I saw in the paper like 10 years ago, he's a vascular surgeon in the Carolinas somewhere.
Oh
So
wow,
it was really neat
good
to
for
see.
him.
Yeah.
So Gilmore's your number 3,
4.
4. Did I skip you? Because Robertson's my number 4.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah.
Who's next on yours, or who should go next?
Well,
I think you'll like my next one.
Go ahead, go with 3.
All right. Darrell Griffith. And this is, again, when I just started paying attention to basketball. This guy, I remember, and he was about 6'4", but I just remember he took off. There was like a slow motion replay of him. He took off at about the charity stripe, and he was just like twisting and turning in the air and, dunk the ball. And they used to call him Dr. Duncanstein.
Duncanstein, right?
Yeah. And I don't know if a lot of people remember him, but I just thought he was phenomenal. And he won the first national championship, I believe, with Louisville under Denny Crum in 1980.
Yeah, I remember him, if for nothing else, the nickname Dr. Duncanstein. I mean, that's one of the all-time great nicknames right there.
That was another one of my priorities. Better college than pro player. and nickname was high on the list.
well, Artis Gilmore, the A Train. That's not a
Oh
bad
yeah,
one
you
either.
could have done that one. Yeah, and you got ahead of me on Skywalker. So yeah.
Okay, so number 3 for me is Bill Walton. What can I say? But that what people don't know, he averaged 20 points a game, almost 16 rebounds a game. He averaged 65% shooting. He was a 3-time All-American, and twice he was the most outstanding player in the NCAA tournament. And in that one game, didn't he shoot 22 for 22? I mean, that's nuts.
That's crazy. Yeah, I saw Zion had a game. He was 13 for 13. I think when he came back from his injury. Well, what sticks out to me about Bill Walton is the first time the Gators went to the national championship. It was 2005, 2006, and it was so.
Clerk.
What's
No,
that?
that was no. I was
A
thinking the clerk, but that was after the clerk.
A little
Yeah.
after the clerk. But yeah, so you have everyone from UCLA on the radio and TV all day just talking about this UCLA team. Let me tell you about it. These guys are great. The coach is great. They're a dominant team. Yada yada yada. And it's like, and then they would go, and everybody likes Billy Donovan. He seems like a nice guy. And kind of tapping the Gators on the top of the head. It was nice of these guys to go up, but UCLA is obviously going to run the table on them. And so that just made beating UCLA that much better. So much fun.
Yeah, big redhead. That's my number 3.
Yeah. You want my number 2?
Sure.
Christian Laettner. And I thought Laettner, this is again another guy who's a lot better in college than in the pros. But I thought, and I mean, he played with good players. He played with Bobby Hurley. He played with Grant Hill. I thought he was the best player at every aspect of his game. I thought he had better handles than Bobby Hurley. I thought he had better anything than anybody. And what really sticks out in my head, and I think everybody's head, is in '92, that tournament game against Kentucky, and they had like 2 seconds left. And
he should not have been in the game. Anybody else would have been thrown out.
Yeah. And they were like, I was like, well, the only chance they have is you throw it the length of the court. He's at the charity stripe. He's got to turn right around and sink it. And I said, what are the chances of that? And Grant Hill launches it. Laettner, lands it in there. And so they win that, and they won it back to back. And there was one more thing I was saying. Oh, everybody loves to talk about Michigan, the Fab Four, the Five. Those guys, this Duke team, and I saw Grant Hill wrote about this. They never lost to that Michigan team. So I was not, when they were playing against Kentucky, I kind of wanted Kentucky to win because I was more of an SEC guy. And I grew up because my grandfather went to Chapel Hill, UNC. I was kind of a Duke hater. But after that game, I was like, maybe these guys are all right. So
my argument against Christian Laettner is Duke against UNLV without Grant Hill lose by 20-something. Duke with Grant Hill beats UNLV.
Let me say another thing about Christian Laettner. He's kind of a local favorite too. He actually played for this semi-pro team we have here called the Jacksonville Giants. And it was just like an exhibition game. He kind of came out and played, but he lived in the area for a while too. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Well, maybe. So my number 2, Lou Alcindor. You mentioned him before, and you already gave your top 9. So I really don't understand how you don't have Lou top 10. He averaged 26.4 points a game on 63% shooting, 16 rebounds a game. He was a 3-time All-American, three championships, 3 times what's it called? The most outstanding player in the NCAA tournament. He was the number 1 pick. What didn't he do?
Okay, 2 very objective reasons why he's not on my list. A, I don't like him, and B, the other
that's
reason
not objective.
I just don't like him. How and the other reason is because
that sounds personal.
Very personal. He played for the Lakers, who I hate. So yeah, that's how I was able to keep him off the list. But yeah, talent wise, no question. He and Bill Walton, both products of the Wooden system. I mean, and great players. And I think Wooden, like Bill Walton's kind of a hippie. I think he made him cut his hair or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of a
Or
funny story.
I love the story. I think Bill Walton, he had attended some protest or something, got his name in the paper, maybe got arrested, and Wooden had to sit him down. I was like, look, son, we're not gonna be doing that kind of stuff.
No, this ain't that kind of a party.
Right.
This ain't that kind of a party. Yeah, and my number one, who I already mentioned, is Pete Maravich. This guy, I believe, he still holds the all-time college scoring record, and he only played 3
For
years.
men.
3
Right.
years because freshmen didn't play at that time, and he
Right.
averaged 44
44.
points a game with no 3-point line, and he was a guard. So
So you're kind of stealing my thunder. I thought I was gonna have to defend him because Pistol Pete is my number one.
who saw that coming?
And my rationale for that is I don't think there's ever been a player more skilled than Pistol Pete in college, maybe even the pros. Pros, more competition, but just skill wise, his handles were never seen before. His passes had never been seen before. And you mentioned he averaged 44 points a game with no 3-point line.
In
And
college.
if he's able to play 4 years, Caitlin Clark does not break his record. In fact, nobody breaks his record. Who's going to average 44 points a game for 4 years? Because that's what would have to be done.
Yeah.
But besides that, he was a 3-time All-American and 2-time Player of the Year.
Yeah. Amazing.
So when you said you had Pistol Pete number one, I was like, wow, I'm not going to have to defend my number one, at least not to you.
Yeah.
People might come at us in the comments, but
Right.
hey, if you come at us in the comments, at least state your reasons why. Give valid reasons, because if your guy, if he can't average 44 points a game and be a 3-time All-American and 2-time Player of the Year, I don't know how your guy's better than my guy, because it's not just the points. Like I mentioned, it's his passing, it's his handles, his dribbling. This dude was so skilled with the ball. I mean, he could dribble with his eyes closed, laying down.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
now people copycat things he did.
Right. Yeah, and
He's
he
definitely a
died
trailblazer.
kind of young playing pickup basketball, which reminded me of the Celtic player Reggie Lewis, who actually he died playing in a pickup game too. And just tragic those guys. And I think maybe they both had heart issues as well. I'm not sure, but when I read about the way Pete died, it definitely kind of reminded me of that of Reggie Lewis.
Yeah, so you certainly have an interesting top 10. Like I said, I will take issue with a couple. I don't know if you take issue with any of mine, but your list is your list. My list is my list.
No, I really I respect the fact that you went so deep and so far back. I was like, I reached on a couple of those, but I really, yeah, mine were more recent. Most of them, except for Bradley, were pretty recent, and
Yeah,
artists more.
I mean, if one player, because if we're gonna be homers, then I gotta mention Rick Mount, Purdue legend. That dude, I went to Purdue's basketball camp. I think it was 1984, 85 maybe, and he was one of the guys that came to talk to us. But while he was talking, he was shooting. He must have made 55 out of 57 shots right-handed as he's talking, walking around the court, shooting over here, shooting over there, top of the key, baseline, everywhere. Then he starts shooting left-handed. And I'm not talking, from the free throw line. He's shooting 19, 20 footers all around the court, left-handed. He probably was like 45 out of 50 left-handed. I was like, this dude is right-handed and left-handed. I had
Yeah.
heard stories about him, but to see that kind of performance live, that was incredible.
Yeah. Now another guy who was ambidextrous was who the Gators had was David Lee. And what happened was, I think he broke his right arm in high school, and so he just learned to play with his left hand, and so he could go either way. And he played among a number of other good players, so he didn't really stand out to me. And he had at least as good of a pro career. He wasn't that prolific, but I think he played for a long time for the Knicks and the Spurs. But yeah, he could go both with either hand.
How long ago did he play?
It was right. He came out a couple of years before they won the national championship. You don't remember him? David Lee? He didn't really stand out. He was never like an all-pro or anything.
I'm trying to think. Is that the same guy who was with the Warriors?
Maybe.
Yeah, because they had. I don't know if it was David Lee. I can't remember. But anyway, I mean, it's hard to come up with 10. So many great college players. Guys we haven't even mentioned yet. Patrick Ewing, Michael Jordan. Guy, you mentioned Christian Laettner. One guy probably is not going to get a lot of love, but somebody who was really difficult to deal with, Chris Jackson at LSU. That dude could light it up. How him, Shaq, and Stanley Roberts didn't win more, I don't know. Something must have been going on down there.
And neither of us said Shaq either. And I actually saw Shaq playing college against the Gators.
Shaq was great. I mean, he was dominant, but I think Chris Jackson was a better college player than Shaq was.
When you talked about Magic, it reminded me about Shaq, because I think even before Shaq got to LSU, I was like, who is this Shaq guy everyone's talking about? His reputation kind of preceded him.
Really? See, I didn't know anything about him.
Yeah.
Did he have ties to Florida?
Maybe, but I mean, he was from Louisiana, played in LSU, so
okay.
Nothing I can really remember until he went down to Orlando and then broke my heart in two and had to boycott basketball for a couple of years after that.
Well, anybody else you want to mention? Honorable mention for our list?
No one I can think of, but with a list of 10 people, you're always going to leave people out. There, been so many great players over the years that, there's just going to, there's only so much you can do. And I mean, we talked about Patrick Ewing, but we said nothing about, like Iverson or Alonzo Mourning. So I've always been a fan of the Georgetown teams, especially, when they had who was the coach who was there forever?
John Thompson.
Yeah, John Thompson was like, and I love listening to him call games and stuff too. So yeah, I always like.
Something that endeared me to John Thompson was when Freddie Brown passed the ball to Worthy and North Carolina won that championship. I remember John Thompson consoling him and hugging him. And as a kid, that was embedded in my brain. Like, you could tell how much he truly felt for his player.
Right.
Because I talked about Bobby Knight, last week. If that's Bobby Knight, he's not going to hug his player.
No, he might.
Ain't no way he's hugging his player and consoling his player. He's probably ripping him up and down. After the game, he probably says, we had the perfect play called, and I don't know why he threw the ball to Worthy, and, he's going to throw his guy under the bus. But for me, John Thompson doing that, showing how much he cared about his player, that meant a lot, at least to me.
And neither of us said Michael Jordan either.
Oh, I mentioned him.
Oh, did you?
I mentioned him after I said Ewing. Yeah, even James Worthy was great.
I was gonna say Perkins too. I mean, those were just great teams. Yeah, to me, Jordan was kind of like an also ran, but I guess Perkins and Worthy got there before him, so those guys were just, as a team, just spectacular.
The narrative is, and it's probably true, Dean Smith held Michael Jordan back.
Yeah.
That's why when he got to the pros, there was no holding him back.
Yeah. Hey, can you pause it for a second?
Yeah. And we're back. So that was our top 10. I'll do a quick recap of my top 10. Number 10, I had. Oh, actually, I gave you my number 9. That's how our numbers got mixed up. Wow, I messed up. Number 10 is Jordan. I,
Okay.
yeah,
I didn't remember you mentioning.
I didn't. Number 10 is MJ. To be a freshman, he made the plays down the stretch to win that championship for them. And then he was two-time player of the year after that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, MJ did make my top 10. Number 9 is David Thompson, the Skywalker. Number 8, Elgin Baylor. Number 7, Elvin Hayes. Number 6, Larry Bird. Number 5, Bill Russell. Number 4, Oscar Robertson. Number 3, the big redhead, Bill Walton. Number 2, Lou Alcindor. And number 1, Pistol Pete Maravich, who I say is the most skilled college player of all time.
Yeah. And it's so interesting the similarities we ended up with too, because we had David Thompson around the same rank and Pete Maravich. So mine were to repeat: number 10, Patrick Young; number 9, Zion Williamson; number 8, David Thompson from Skywalker from NC State; number 7, Danny Manning; number 6, Ralph Sampson; number 5, Bill Bradley; number 4, Artis Gilmore; number 3, Dr. Duncan Steen, Daryl Griffith; number 2, Christian Leitner; number 1, Pistol Pete.
And there you have it. Anything else you'd like to say before we sign off?
Well, do we want to talk about this year's tournament?
I don't know. We're already over 40 minutes.
Oh, are we? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just want. All right. Well, I'll just sign out.
I mean,
get on.
Yeah, because the next playing game is going to be starting here pretty soon, isn't it?
Yep. And
well, good luck to your Gators. For you guys watching, whoever your team is, good luck to you. And let us know in the comments what you think about our list. But come with facts, not feelings. Deuces.
Especially if you like my list.
Out.
That sounded like an open invitation to try.